I'm joined by John Fishwick Jr., who is a trial lawyer and a former U.S. attorney for the Western District of Virginia. Welcome to the show, John. Great having you. And how strong is the government's monopoly claim against Meta?
Well, the trend, Diego, recently is that the government has had success against big tech in these antitrust cases. Google, after all, has lost 2 cases on the merits, dealing with their search engines and also digital ads. And so in this case that has been brought against Meta was originally brought by the Trump administration. The case kind of petered out. It was rebooted by the Biden administration. And so now the case is on a fast track and in trial. So it's kind of a bipartisan effort here. The trend is against big tech. I think it's early stages to know exactly what's going to happen in the trial. I think Mr. Zuckerberg was a smooth witness, but some of the emails that were produced probably undermine that case. I think ultimately it's going to be determined by Judge Boasberg, and he's going to have to decide really what are the competitors of Meta or of Facebook. Is it a more narrow competition that they're dominating with companies like Snapchat, or is it a broader competition arena with companies such as TikTok and YouTube? And that's what Meta says. And so that's what it's really going to come down to. But ultimately, the trend is against big tech, and certainly $42 billion of revenue in a 3-month period shows that's certainly monopoly money. It may not prove the legal case, but it's a lot of money that they're making. Sure, that will get the judge's attention as well.
Absolutely. And Zuckerberg testified that buying Instagram was a move to eliminate competition. How does that admission impact the case now?
I think that's a significant admission. Anytime there's trial testimony, but we're talking about purchases by Instagram and of WhatsApp, and that's what the underlying case is, that took place a long time ago, 2012, 2014. So you really do want to look at kind of what was the written evidence or digital evidence at that time. And those emails that Zuckerberg wrote back then do undermine that case. If you're going to buy somebody to make money in an easier way than competing with them, that's an indication of a monopoly. So I do think those emails are powerful evidence. I think the judge will rely on that a lot in his decision. The testimony is far removed from when these purchases take place, and there's been a lot of water under the bridge, so to speak, as these purchases have taken place. So the digital evidence, what they wrote and said at that time, I think will be powerful evidence for this judge.
And can Meta prepare for a possible court-ordered divestiture of Instagram and WhatsApp?
Well, I think Meta is going to appeal no matter what happens, and that's probably a long ways off if the judge orders that. I mean, lawyer time is slower than most folks' time, but an antitrust case takes forever. After all, this case started in the first Trump administration. So if this judge orders a breakup, Meta for sure would appeal, and it would go to the Court of Appeals, and then it could make its way to the Supreme Court. And one of those courts could say, hey, that judge made a mistake. We've got to start this thing all over. And also remember that Zuckerberg has lobbied President Trump in a significant way. And so there's always the possibility that he could reach a settlement with Trump and then ultimately with the FTC. So they're going to fight tooth and nail selling off Instagram and WhatsApp. They're not making any preparation for that. They're going to the mattresses for that. I don't think that's at all something they're going to prepare for, because that's just a huge cash cow for them, and they would fight that in a significant way and continue to fight the legal case.
Yeah, I want to talk about this case in the greater scheme of things, because there would be broader implications for the tech industry, right, John?
Absolutely. And as I mentioned earlier, the trend now is on both the Republican and Democratic side, which is unusual in this country. There is kind of a trend to say, hey, big tech does have monopolistic power and market power, and there are just very few of these big tech companies making, significant amount of money. We're talking billions that they're making it on a quarterly basis. And so I think the big impact here and the trend for the country to be aware of, there are going to be more of these cases. I think the Trump Antitrust Division is going to be just as active as Biden. After all, they could have dropped this case, and the Trump administration said, no, full steam ahead. So I think the implications, no matter who wins this case, is that big tech is on the radar of the United States government. Both Republicans and Democrats want to see their powers reduced, the monopolistic powers that they have potentially broken up. So it has big impact for these companies, and that's why they're going to fight these efforts so in a big way and make sure that they drag it out for as long as they can to hope that the problem goes away and the litigation eventually dies out.
And John, today's Meta's earnings were above expectations. Do you think it affects in any way this ongoing case?
Well, judges are human beings. He'll be aware of how much money they make. He'll have to make legal decisions. Are they a monopoly? What are their competitors? Are they a monopoly and taking over an industry? It really comes down to are they dominating the social networking sort of platform? That'll be the ultimate decision. But certainly this is monopoly money. $42 billion in a 3-month period shows that they're making a lot of money. So are they making that because they're a monopoly? Or are they making that just because they're good business folks and they've improved Instagram and WhatsApp and they've got a lot of competitors out there and they're just good at their business? Or are they making a lot of this money because those purchases turn them into a monopoly? And ultimately, that's going to be what the judge is going to have to decide.
And John, I want to ask you about the tariffs that led to a drop in advertising by Chinese e-commerce companies on platforms like Facebook and Instagram, right? Do you think this could be a leverage in the case? It could be used in any way as it affects Meta's ad revenue and future outlook?
Meta really kind of had such great earnings that it doesn't look like the tariffs have had much impact on them. They mentioned that, when they brought in their earnings today. It looks like it may have affected some of their competitors. Snap has indicated that it's going to affect them. Google has issued a concern about it. So I do think it's going to affect some of their competitors. So far, it hasn't really affected Meta. They've mentioned it, but the kind of money they made and the kind of growth they had, it looks like the tariffs have had very little, if any, impact on their earnings right now. I know it's something they're watching, but I think it could affect the other big tech companies because I think there's an expectation that there's going to be a fall off on ad revenue because of the tariffs.